Okay, so today I want to show you how to basically create a house or a small structure from scratch using all of our tools that we learned how to use previously in SketchUp. All tools located up at the top here, and also give them kind of like a realistic definition with all these materials on the right here that we have access to. So before I talk about that, I want to talk a little bit about our kind of like our display screen here, our workspace. So you might have seen these three different colored lines here. We have the blue line, green, and a red line. So basically what they represent are the three different axes within our model. So the red one stands for the x-axis, the green stands for the y-axis, and the blue stands for the z-axis. Now x and y you're probably most familiar with because that's what you might deal with in any of your math classes, geometry, anything along those lines, and that's just the basics of two-dimensional sketching. So you have the two axes for two-dimensional sketching. What brings it into 3 dimensions is this z-axis that goes up and down. So now that we know a little bit more information about that, let's start from scratch. So before we start making the house itself, we literally have to start with the landscaping or the ground that it sits on. So what you have to do is go up here, grab a rectangle tool or whatever shape you want your yard to be, click on it, and drag it to whatever size or shape or however large you want it to be. And it might help if you look on the bottom right hand corner down here at your dimensions, just to give you kind of like a rough idea of how you are drawing. Now one thing I also want to talk about is if you're drawing an object or a shape, make sure you're also in a camera view that you can draw where you want that object or shape to be. Obviously I want to be drawing on the ground, so I want to be within the x and the y axis. We don't want to be at a camera angle where we're drawing up and down, and that would be on the z-axis. So make sure you're in the proper camera angle, and you can kind of see just by drawing and playing around here, it does change depending on which angle you're located at. So once you're happy with how big your yard or just your landscape area is, click on it, and it should turn into a solid shape. Once it turns into that solid shape, I think before we go any further, it's probably a good idea if we click on the paint bucket tool, go over to our materials, find the landscaping, fencing, and vegetation, click on that. There's 2 different types of grass to pick from. Usually I like to go with dark green, but that's just me. Alright, next step what we have to do is we have to create the structure of the building itself. And remember, we start out with 2-dimensional shapes and eventually make it into the 3-dimensional shape with the push-pull tool. So depending on the footprint of your house, I just want to make mine a general basic 4-sided house, and make sure you're in the right view. So general rectangle will do just fine for me and my uses. So you can make them whatever size or shape you want to depending on what you have in mind. So in order to make it into a 3-dimensional shape, just like we learned earlier, we have to use the push-pull tool. So make sure it's a solid object and you have all these little ants that show up inside. Click and you can pull it up. Make sure you don't push it down. We don't want it to go underground. We want it to go up. So push it up to the right distance, and keep an eye down here on the right hand corner where you have the distance. So usually 1 floor of a house is around 12 feet in height. If you want to have it 2 floors, that's around 24 or 30 feet in height. So for me, I just want to go with a 1-story house, so I'm going to go around 12 feet in height. So once you do that, I think it's appropriate enough that we have to draw a roof on it. So very simple enough. Let's go to the side view. We want to make a roof go left to right. Go to the side view. You might have to reposition yourself just a little bit so you can see a little bit better. Now this part, it's a little tricky for some of you. You don't know how to do it, but it's very simple once you figure it out. Grab the line tool, and basically you have to think about what the shape of a roof is. So when I think about it, it's basically just a triangle. So draw a triangle from starting one endpoint up at the top to make the peak, then down at the other endpoint. If you did it correctly, it'll start to change like a gray or a white color. Rotate around. Now this is the fun part. Grab the push-pull tool, make sure those little ants show up, click on it once, drag it to the other side, and you might have to rotate a little bit, and you want to stop it right on that edge right there so it comes just to meet the edge. Alright, next step, we want to put some shingles on this thing. So let's go into here. We want to go to scroll down, find roofing, and there's a bunch of different types here. It looks like we have 10 different types of roofing. I just want to go with regular asphalt shingles, so click on that. We'll put shingles on the front, shingles on the back, and shingles on both sides. Now right now as it stands, our house still kind of looks a little bit funky because technically we have grass on the walls. So what we need to do is figure out what kind of wall material we want. So we'll have to go down to brick, cladding, and siding. I think for my purpose, I like to go just with a regular brick antique. So click around, make sure you fill the area in. And if you zoom in a little bit closer, you'll be able to see the texture. And make sure you don't make your building too big or else you won't be able to see the texture. So pay attention to those measurements down on your right hand side. Alright, next thing we want to do is give this house a little bit more of a detailed edge. So think about the different things that go on a house. So you have doors, you have windows, you might have a garage on the side, maybe a porch. So you'll have to basically start out from scratch. So right now I think I'm going to draw maybe a window on the side. So we're going to grab our rectangle tool and find the approximate location of where we want to put the window. I think I want to put one down near the edge here. So draw a rectangle, make sure it's proportionate and it makes sense. It's not too big or too small. Click once. And it'll be hard to see, but that is a solid shape. So next thing we want to do, I think I want to make this a little bit of a fancy window. So I'm going to have some trim around the outside and just plain glass in the center. So I drew my trim around the outside and the glass is going to go in the center. Click on the paint bucket tool over to the side here. We want to go to glass and mirrors. And usually I like to go with just like a translucent blue, or you can go with green, yellow, or gold, gray, and a lighter blue, whatever you want to. Click on it once, and the fun part is you can literally see through the other side, so it's kind of identical to just a regular piece of glass. Now for the trim itself, since I want to be a little bit fancy, I want to make that into wood trim. So scroll down to the bottom here, we'll find some type of wood. Don't want to do wood floor, that won't really make sense to put that on as trim, so I want to do like a cherry. So click on the outside, and if I did it correctly, it should change colors, just like that. Alright, now let's say we want to put a door on the side of this thing. Same basic process. Start at the bottom here, and if you think about it, a door is basically like a big rectangle. Pay attention down to the right hand side here. Generally a door is around, I'd say, 8 feet in height, and as far as width, usually doors are around like 4 or 4.5 feet in width, maybe in between 3 and 4. So that right there looks like a perfect distance to me, and I think I want to put trim on this one as well, so I'll have to zoom in so I can get a little bit closer here. Same basic shape on the inside, or if I want to cheat a little bit, I can actually go up here to my scale tool or my offset tool, click on it once, literally just make it smaller, just like that. Once we make the trim to the appropriate size, grab your paint bucket tool. I want to do wood trim just like the time before, so just like that. And I think for the door itself, I want to change it up and make it just a specific color. So I'm going to go to colors named, and I think for my purposes, I'm going to go for kind of like a maroon. So a maroon door, that looks just fine to me. Now also think about the small little details that goes along with the model itself. So that right there, if you think about it realistically, that door really serves no purpose because it doesn't even have a handle. So think about how geometrically a handle is made up. So if I think about it, basically it's just a circle. So zoom in a little bit closer so you can get the exact size. If you're zoomed out too far, the handle will be too big. And usually I like to keep the handle about the halfway point in between the door top and the ground. So about right there should be fine. Make sure it's not too close to the side of the door too. Zoom in so you can get a little bit closer and make it just about the right size. So if you make it around, let's see, that's around 2 7/16, so maybe around 4 inches. That should be a good sized doorknob for us. And right now that's just a plain circle, which is kind of boring if you ask me. So what we want to do is push pull it into a 3-dimensional object. Oops, give me a second here. So make sure the little ants highlight. Push pull it out just a little bit. Now it won't be the perfect definition of a true handle, but we're just getting a basic definition, or kind of like an example of what it should look like. And as far as colors go, I think I just want to make this just a plain Jane gray color. That looks just fine to me. Alright, now let's dress up this front end just a little bit, and I think I want to go as far as making like a small sidewalk on the front of the house here. So what I want to do is pan out and zoom out just a little bit so I can see better. And depending on how your sidewalk is, let's say you want to make it curved or straight, you might be using either the line tool, some arcs, or even the rectangle tool. For me, I just want to make a straight sidewalk from one end to the other, and make sure it obviously lines up with the edge of the door. You don't want a sidewalk coming way over here because that just doesn't make sense. Make sure you're in the proper view, so looking straight down will be fine for me. Snap it, and it's hard to see, but it is one solid shape. It won't really change shape, or it won't look like a sidewalk until we take the paint bucket tool, go to the asphalt concrete, and turn it into some kind of concrete form. So what I would usually do is go for maybe a concrete look, not blacktop or asphalt. So polished concrete, new, that looks fine to me. Click, and just like that, we created a sidewalk. Now to dress this thing up a little bit more, I think it'd be a good idea just to put some landscaping in here. So easy enough, just like we learned a little bit previously, go into the 3D modeling warehouse. So click on that, it'll pop up. Give it some time to load. It takes a little bit of time, but it'll get there. So I think for me, I'm going to go as far as making or putting a mailbox in the front of my yard. So type in mailbox, enter, wait for it to load up a little bit. There's a bunch of different mailboxes that come up. Make sure you have one that kind of makes sense or fits your needs. For me, I'm just going to go with this one right here. That looks fine for me. Click on it. Yes, I'm going to download it straight into the model. And then this one, whew, that's pretty big if you ask me. That's a big mailbox. So what I'll need to do is zoom out a little bit. And this might require some modifications. It's literally bigger than my house, which is kind of ridiculous. But easy way to fix that, we just go over here to our scale tool, and we can literally scale it down to our size that we want to. So make sure you make it just about the right height, just to give you an idea of how big it should be, or certain parts of your house should be. Not sure if you noticed, but on the side here, we actually have a person, which is a realistic rendition of a person and how large they are. This little worker girl with her little toolbox and her tools. So when I'm looking at things, I think I want to make sure that this mailbox is kind of like in line and just about the right size for her. So usually if you think about it, a mailbox for a traditional grown human comes up just about to their just above their waist. So what I want to do is grab my scale tool, scale it down just a little bit more, not too small, not too big. And then just to move it around, I want to grab my move tool, and I'll move it from the bottom right over here, right at the very end. So go through your model, do all kinds of different things. You can place fencing around. You can, if you want to, you can put like an in-ground pool in the back, which is easy enough.